My guest today is Dr. Donna Hoskins. She's a professor and department chair of health and human sciences at Bridgewater College in Virginia. Her passion and research is in early childhood and the consequences of parenting on child outcomes. And her research on this topic has been published in top tier academic journals, and she presents and is a keynote speaker at early childhood conferences. And she has served as president of the Virginia Association of Family and Consumer Services, and has also served as the board president of a child care center that she founded. And in 1923, she was awarded the Outstanding Teaching Award at Bridgewater College. So we are delighted to have her to visit with today. And her current research focuses on the way that teachers communicate with children, and particularly in early childhood settings. So thank you, Donna, for being with us today. Well, Donna and I were talking recently, and she said something that I found that was just fascinating. She said that with early childhood teachers, that they tend to be I'm paraphrasing, so this wouldn't be exactly what she said, but they tend to be very strong in sort of the soft, affirming skills of making children feel comfortable and loved and affirmed in the classroom. They tend to not be so strong in some of the problem solving skills and helping them develop in maybe the harder sciences or that type of communication. And that is what she is working on. And so thought I'd start with that. If you could tell us a little bit about what you have found as you talk with and visit preschools, and kind of came to this observation that they're strong in the warm fuzzies, but maybe there's things that we can be doing that are different in the problem solving skills.
So I go into a lot of daycares and help early childhood teachers. And also, I directed the Child Development Lab at Bridgewater College for about 10 years. And so I'm always coaching teachers to do a better job. And so within my work, I have observed many teachers over the years. And one common theme that I observe is the low levels of discourse happening in classrooms. And so in these classrooms, there's high warmth, um, love between the teacher and the child, and there's a lot of management talk. And so what I mean by management talk is sit here, do it this way, go to the bathroom, blow your nose, please don't touch your friend this way. So a lot of management talk, and that's that socialization of children that has to happen. But when you hear that all the time, there's one missing element, and that's the rich discourse
Mm.
and the language development that needs to happen in early childhood. And we go back to Head Start in early childhood. And so a lot of people think, oh, pre-K programs, that's Head Start. And the research in the 60s and 70s showed that kids in poverty do not hear rich discourse. They don't hear those conversations. They hear less words overall. And so that was the goal of Head Start, is to put these kids in a classroom environment so they could have experiences and be exposed to language. And years later, we're not seeing the improvement that we would hope to see. And so speaking of about the research, in 2008, UVA did a study, and they looked at schools in various states, and only 15% of early childhood educators were engaging in rich discourse with children. And I haven't seen improvements in that. And so my goal is to coach teachers, teach them how to do it, model it to them to get us to the next level and equip kids.
And so, and when you're talking rich discourse, am I correct that you are talking about a conversation back and forth with the child, not a one way from the teacher, but hearing back from the student as well? Is that your description of a rich discourse?
Right. And so I always tell teachers, think about it. And this is something that I have thought about, but I call it the ABC approach. When you hear a child say something, you add a word or many words, you repeat back and add to that, extend that, and then have a conversation with them. And a conversation is a two-way street, right? And so there's serve and return, which we typically think about in the infant classroom, but in early childhood, it's extending those thoughts and carrying those on for several minutes and not just saying what you hear a lot of is good job. And so we want to move beyond that and equip them with skills. And we do that through those conversations with the children. And that's where I call it think out loud. We want to hear children think out loud. And this goes back to Vygotsky. He said that we need to engage in scaffolding and we need to find that zone of proximal development. Where are children? Where are they at? And how can we grow and develop them? And basically, I mean, that approach is the whole child. And so it's not just about socio-emotional development, although that's really important in early childhood, but it's also about the cognitive development and the academic skills.
So why do you think that those statistics of only 15% doing that, why do you think that that is the situation with why so many teachers are not doing it that way?
With the language development and having conversations with children, there's a lot of intentionality that has to happen. And so we get carried away with the management tasks, having 20 kids in a classroom or with an assistant or two teachers or one teacher with 10. We get carried away with all the socialization that has to happen with these young children. And those deeper conversations take us being intentional about it. And so in the child development lab at Bridgewater, I have the students write higher level thinking questions and post them on the wall and around the room. And that grounds them. And that reminds them that, oh, this is where I can go to find a question that's higher level thinking. And that's based on Bloom's taxonomy. We tend to stay in the level 1, the recall. What color is this? What number is this? What letter is this? I see a lot of that. But children are active learners and they need more. And we can incorporate those concepts in conversations we have through play. And it doesn't have to be sitting them down with a pencil and paper at 3, 4, and 5 years of age and saying, what letter is this? What number is this? Do you know what this word means? We can provide that context with them. And so I encourage teachers to use rich vocabularies, use big words with the kids, and don't always stop and say, do you know what that means? Because that maybe the kid doesn't know what it means, but if you provide it in a context, they will figure out what it means. So I always tell my students to label the kids. And what I mean by labeling is, wow, you are building right now. You are an architect. You are an engineer. And this is what you do. You're an engineer because you're building blocks up. Not, you're an architect. Do you know what that means? That's a very disjointed way of going about a conversation. So have these natural conversations with kids, just like you would talk to an adult. And you don't stop and ask people, do you know what that word even means? And we're doing that in early childhood classrooms.
Yeah, that's interesting. I was recently talking about children in architecture, and I looked up what's the definition of an architect, and it's someone who is building structures to live in, that sort of thing. And for a child who is taking blocks and building something. They are building a structure that is basically a scale model, maybe, of a house that someone could live in. The exact same thing that a professional architect would do. So I think the concept of labeling them, they are doing the work of an architect as they are stacking blocks and making a pretend house. And they're not getting paid for it. They're not a professional architect, but they are an architect in the simplest form of the word. So that's interesting to label them that. And it's funny to hear the labeling when normally that's the last thing we want to do is label people, but helping to give them that sense that's really fun.
With that, I'll say you're an engineer. We explore, we design, we recreate. We're great. And so that's really defining what that is
Mm.
without saying, "Do you know what that is?" It's just saying it more like, this is what you're doing right now, and that makes you this.
Hmm. Yeah. So they're living the definition at that moment. So that's great. So it's interesting with putting the questions up around the classroom. That sounds sort of like creating your own cheat sheet for always being able to look up and remind yourself of those basics. And I know some of these things, the concept of giving like encouragement that's very much more specific than just good job. I've been aware of that for years. And when I'm in a class of children, I'm aware of that. And then I often find myself just getting overwhelmed. I can't think of a new specific encouragement. And suddenly it just becomes so much easier just to say, good job. And so I've experienced that firsthand for how easy it is to know these things. And then the, the mental energy that it takes to actually carry them out. So any thoughts on that?
Um, I always tell them, you are a problem solver. You are very creative because you. And so I label.
Hmm.
And you're a good evaluator because you did this and this. And it's important to like give them we have little clipboards in our lab with a piece of paper and a pencil, and that's how we incorporate writing into activities. We don't sit down with a coloring sheet and color it with a colored pencil. We incorporate the writing into the activity, and so it's a very different way of doing things because you still see people sitting all the kids down at the table, and not everybody has to be doing the same thing at the same time. And that's typically what you see in early childhood. And so I think teachers need to remember, I see when I'm doing observations, teachers do better when it's 1-on-4. So a
Hmm.
teacher with 4 children. So if they're around a sensory bin or an open-ended material, there seems to be more discussion that happens whenever there's fewer children with that teacher.
Hmm.
And so this whole idea of sitting all 10 students down with you at the same time may be a disservice, right? And not help us do that better. You can scan the room and watch all the children do different things at different times, and you have a cluster or a small group of children where you're intentionally asking these questions. And I tell teachers, just start doing it for 20 minutes a day and being intentional about it. And then it will become natural. And then what you'll see in the classroom, and it's so neat, is the students start asking these thought provoking questions.
Hmm.
There's 4-year-olds going, I'm a problem solver. I did this. And so they're labeling themselves. And so I see it with my kids. And so I have a 5-year-old. And so he's my little guinea pig. And I'll say, you're a problem solver because you did this. And he'll go, I'm a problem solver, mommy. And so and he'll ask those questions. How could I build this in a better way? If something that no one has ever seen before. And so that's those higher level questions in Bloom's taxonomy. And that's that creativity that we want to promote and enhance. And that's what cognitive development is all about with children. And we often think, you have to think of the whole child, the cognitive, the physical, and the socio-emotional. And the cognitive skills, it's harder for teachers to develop those. And we think we're doing it by level 1. What letters this, what numbers this, what colors this. And so we have to change the way that we're doing this.
We'll pause this interview here for today, but stay tuned for next week's continuation of this conversation. In the meantime, check out our YouTube channel for more ways to transform your classroom.